For as long as Trang could remember, her family had talked about visiting Kianjiang. She grew up listening to stories of Ratchgir's bustling port, the serene beauty of nearby Pukwac, and the warmth of the southern coast. Finally, the occasion arose, a distant relative's wedding at a riverside venue in Kianjiang. Trang's mother, Mrs. Han, insisted the whole family should attend. Her father, Mr. Tom, agreed, eager for a short vacation from their home in Anjiang. Trang, now 17, looked forward to exploring a new place. Her younger brother, Long at 10, was simply excited about any road trip. They set out early one Saturday morning, bundling into Mr. Tom's old sedan for the 3-hour drive south.
Ze rots war und trug luschrisse pedis en sketteret palentrees. Ze Mekongsbranches glimmering under the sun.
Long dozed in the back seat, head bobbing with the car's motion, while Trang gazed out the window. Her parents chatted about wedding gifts and who might attend. The day felt bright, optimistic. Around noon, they arrived in Kianjiang, impressed by the lively waterfront market and fishing boats anchored in the harbor. They grabbed a quick meal, then planned to check in at a hotel arranged by a friend of Mr. Tom's. According to that friend, the hotel offered newly renovated rooms at a good price. Perfect for a family on a budget. But when they finally located the Namgyung Hotel, it looked older than expected. Faded letters spelled the name in chipped paint. The exterior was 3 stories of washed-out beige, with minimal landscaping. A middle-aged clerk at the front desk, Ms. Liu, greeted them with a polite smile. She apologized, saying the hotel was partly under refurbishment. Most rooms were booked for the wedding crowd, but fortunately, a room 105 remained available. She handed them the key, noting the elevator was out of service, though that was irrelevant since room 105 was on the ground floor. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant, and the overhead lights flickered. As they wheeled their small suitcases along, an uneasy hush fell. Something about the building's corridor felt stale. Long, usually chatty, grew silent. Trang felt a prickle of apprehension. Yet they brushed aside any misgivings, relieved to have found a place to stay. They had no notion of the chilling events about to unravel behind room 105's door. Room 105 was tucked at the end of the corridor, next to a locked service closet. The key stuck momentarily in the doorknob before turning. Mr. Tom pushed it open, flicking on the overhead light. A single queen bed for the parents, plus a smaller daybed near the window for Trang and Long. The decor was serviceable, if outdated: musty curtains, scuffed laminate floors, and a small TV perched on a dusty cabinet. The attached bathroom boasted old, off-white tiles, a standalone tub, and flickering fluorescent overhead. The family lugged in their bags. Mrs. Han sighed, "Well, it's just for one night. We'll attend the wedding tomorrow, then head home the next day." Mr. Tom cracked a smile, trying to lighten the mood, while Long bounced on the daybed, testing its springs. Trang rummaged for her phone charger, uneasy but trying to dismiss it as typical old hotel gloom. Mr. Tom, feeling grimy from travel, volunteered to check the bathroom. "I'll start the shower," he said, but upon opening the door, he let out a small hiss.
Ha, come look at this."
Curiosity piqued. The family crowded at the threshold. The bathtub was partly filled with water, though no faucet was running, and floating on the surface were long dark strands of hair, coiling like seaweed.
A renset with rose from the water.
A wave of revulsion hit them. "How disgusting," Mrs. Han muttered. The staff must have missed cleaning. She marched out to call the front desk. Trang peered closer at the tub, her stomach turning. The hair looked fresh, sleek with an oily sheen. Why would housekeeping leave this unaddressed? Moments later, Ms. Liu arrived, apologizing profusely, promising to drain the tub and thoroughly sanitize. "We've been short-staffed," she explained. "The wedding guests arrived all at once. Please don't worry." She drained the water and scooped the clumps of hair away, looking visibly rattled but trying to remain professional. The Tom family decided to let it pass, chalking it up to a housekeeping error. But an undercurrent of unease lingered. Whose hair was that, and why had it been left in such a state? After the cleaning fiasco, the family opted to stroll around the nearby streets, grabbing dinner at a local eatery. They tried fish soup and grilled seafood. The bustle of Kianjiang's nightlife lifted their spirits. By the time they returned to Namgyung Hotel, it was around 9 p.m. The corridor seemed emptier than ever, the few other wedding guests likely out celebrating. Mr. Tom conferred with Ms. Liu at the desk about tomorrow's wedding details, leaving Mrs. Han Trang and Long to go on ahead to the room. Long rummaged for a new candy he'd bought, craving a sweet treat. Mrs. Han flicked on the TV at low volume while sorting clothes for tomorrow. Feeling restless, Trang wandered to the window. The thick drapes parted slightly, revealing the dimly lit parking lot behind the hotel. A lone lamp cast pools of orange light on cracked asphalt. Then she froze. A figure hovered near the edge of that circle of light, a woman, wearing a pale dress, hair streaming over her shoulders. The woman's face was turned upward, seemingly staring at the second-floor rooms. But as Trang watched, the woman lowered her gaze directly at room 105's window. At her. Stark alarm crashed over Trang. She felt pinned by the woman's stare, though the face was shadowed by hair. Slowly, that unknown figure lifted a hand in a gesture like beckoning. Trang couldn't see the expression, but a sense of foreboding rolled in her gut. She gasped, stepping back.
Trang.
"What's wrong?" came her mother's voice. But in that split second, the figure outside vanished, just gone from the lamplight circle. Shaken, Trang stammered, Maybe I saw someone." She peered out again. The parking lot was empty.
Possibly a trick of the light.
Yet goosebumps traced her arms. She decided not to mention it further, chalking it up to nerves. Half an hour later, Mr. Tom returned, distributing sweets to Long. The family prepared for bed. None suspected that the silent observer in the lot might soon intrude far more aggressively. Exhausted from travel, the Tom family turned in around 10:30 p.m. Mr. Tom and Mrs. Han shared the queen bed. Trang and Long arranged themselves on the daybed, Long at the window side, Trang near the aisle. The overhead light was switched off, leaving them with only a faint glow from the street lamp outside. Sometime around midnight, Mr. Tom stirred, needing the bathroom. He rose carefully, not to disturb others. The corridor outside was silent. The bathroom's fluorescent flickered as he entered. He washed his hands, glancing at the mirror. A fleeting movement behind him made him spin around. Nothing there. Probably exhaustion. Dismissing the thought, he returned to bed. Less than an hour later, an abrupt thud jerked Mrs. Han awake. She shot upright, noticing Mr. Tom shifting oddly, arms raised as though warding off something. Moonlight seeped through the window, illuminating his face contorted in panic. He was gasping, mouth open, but no sound emerged.
An tâm, she whispered, alarm.
But he didn't respond. His eyes were rolled back. Then from nowhere, a wisp of shadow seemed to flicker across his torso. Mrs. Han fumbled for the bedside lamp, heart pounding. The lamp's dull glow revealed a horrifying sight. Mr. Tom's throat was compressed, as if invisible hands choked him. His head jerked side to side, teeth clenched. Mrs. Han let out a cry, shaking his shoulder. Long sat bolt upright, fear contorting his young features. Trang, half awake, saw her father's chest convulse, eyes bulging. Something intangible pinned him. Then, in the stuttering lamplight, a silhouette flickered above him, the outline of a woman, hair cascading, face twisted in feral anger. Mrs. Han let out a squeal of horror. As father's strangled gasps weakened, mother frantically rummaged for her phone. She fumbled to open a music app, selecting a Buddhist chant she sometimes played at home. The phone's speaker crackled to life, a calm chant echoing in the tense air. The silhouette hissed, recoiling from father's form, letting out a shrill, wordless shriek. Then it vanished into the corner near the bathroom. Freed from the invisible grip, Mr. Tom coughed violently, gulping air, eyes wide. All four gathered in the center of the room, hearts hammering. What was that? Long whimpered, tears welling.
Mr. Thermes' voice shook. Yes, a woman. On me, choking me.
Indeed, faint bruises ringed his neck. They kept the lamp blazing for the rest of the night, taking turns dozing in chairs. No one dared shut their eyes for more than a few minutes. The corridor beyond remained silent, as if the entire hotel had descended into a tomb-like hush. At 6 a.m., they decided they could bear the room no longer. The wedding was that afternoon, but they intended to check out and find alternate lodging. Quickly gathering their belongings, they discovered an odd problem. Mr. Tom's watch was missing. Also, a pair of Mrs. Hanna's shoes had vanished from under the bed. Long searched around, rummaging with a flashlight beneath the daybed. In that dim space, he let out a startled yelp. He emerged holding a crumpled talisman, a bua, tied with red thread, etched with unrecognizable symbols. Next to it lay Mrs. Hana's missing shoes, carelessly tossed. That twisted scrap of paper exuded a stale odor. The family gawked at it in dread. Did housekeeping place this? Or that ghost? Mr. Tom's voice trembled. The presence of a bua spelled sinister intentions. Somebody or something had left it under their furniture. They swiftly packed up. As they departed, Ms. Lo hovered behind the front desk, seemingly anxious. Mrs. Han confronted her about the ghostly attack, brandishing the bua. Ms. Lo paled, stammering something about not knowing anything. They demanded a refund for their second booked night. Ms. Lu, cornered, grudgingly returned half their payment. Without further words, the family hauled suitcases outside, escaping the Namgyung Hotel. Once safe in their car, Mother asked Father softly, "Should we call the police?" But Father sighed. The police could do little about a supernatural attack. They decided to focus on the wedding, though that joyous event was overshadowed by the night's horrors. Long refused to leave the car unless someone accompanied him. Trang sat quietly, replaying the vision of that ephemeral female silhouette choking her father, fear coiling in her gut. As they drove aimlessly, uncertain where else to lodge, Mr. Tom recalled an old friend from Kianjong, Mr. Hui, who might host them for a night. Reaching him by phone, they explained they needed urgent accommodations. Hui kindly offered a spare room at his home on the outskirts. The Tom family navigated winding roads, arriving at a humble but welcoming house. Freed from the oppressive atmosphere of the hotel, they exhaled relief. Over lunch, Mr. Hui noticed their shaken expressions. Eventually, Father recounted the entire ordeal: the bathtub hair, the midnight strangling, the discovered bua. Mr. Hui's brow furrowed. "That place has a grim rumor. A young woman died in room 105, he said softly. Some say she was a staff member, abused by a manager, or a depressed traveler. The details vary, but nearly everyone who stays in 105 complains of seeing a ghost. The manager hushes it up to avoid losing business." Hearing this, Mrs. Hana's expression hardened. "If we had known, we'd never have let the kids near that place." She cringed, recalling Father's near-death choking. The conversation turned to the ominous bua. Hui suggested it might have been placed deliberately, or left by prior attempts to deal with the spirit. Sometimes local mediums bury talismans hoping to seal a restless soul, but it's not always effective. That afternoon, Father's bruises on his neck darkened, reminding them how perilously close they'd come. They decided to remain quiet about it at the wedding, not to overshadow the festivities with ghost stories. Still, the tension lingered. In the back of their minds loomed a single thought: what if the spirit follows us? The wedding proceeded with typical southern flair: loud music, abundant food, and bright canopies. The Tom family joined relatives, chatting and congratulating the bride and groom. For a few hours, they relaxed, enjoying the local hospitality. Long devoured sweet cakes, brightening from the previous night's scare. Trang politely conversed with cousins. Yet Father's occasional winces at the bruises on his throat didn't go unnoticed. A few older relatives asked, "What happened? Are you hurt?" He dodged the question. Meanwhile, Mother discreetly burned the discovered bua behind Mr. Hui's house, hoping to rid them of any lingering influence. That night, they returned to Mr. Hui's home. Everyone was drained. The Tom family dozed in a cozy spare bedroom. For the first time since arriving in Kianjong, they slept without fear, lulled by the gentle rustle of coconut trees outside.
No nags. No shadows.
The difference was stark. The haunting was tied to that room or that cursed building. The next morning, the Tom family decided to head back to Enjong, cutting their trip short. They felt no inclination to linger in Kianjong after the traumatic experience at Namgyung Hotel. They thanked Mr. Hui profusely for the last-minute lodging. Ms. Lu from the hotel never followed up about their abrupt departure. During the drive home, Father occasionally rubbed his bruised neck, still sore. Mother sat quietly, replaying the night's terror, still grappling with guilt for putting the family at risk. She vowed never again to compromise on lodging for cheaper rates. Long gazed out the window, hugging a plush toy Father had bought him, subdued in a way that hurt to watch. Even vibrant, curious Trang was mostly silent, replaying images of the ghost outside the window, then choking her father in bed. By late afternoon, they crossed the provincial boundary into Njong, the familiar sight of distant hills and farmland a balm to their frayed nerves. Arriving home, father parked with relief, mother exclaiming how good it felt to be safe. The children sighed, stepping onto their own front porch with gratitude. That evening, they took turns recounting the incident to grandparents and close friends, who listened wide-eyed, as if hearing a cautionary legend. In the ensuing days, father visited a local doctor who confirmed that the bruises, though fading, showed a pattern consistent with strangulation. Mother prayed at the family altar, offering thanks that father was spared. She burned incense daily for a week, muttering quiet words for any lost soul who might need them, hoping no other families would endure the same ordeal. As for Trang, she found herself awakened at times by nightmares of that faceless woman lurking at a window beckoning. She told herself it was just leftover fear, that the ghost was bound to the Namgyung Hotel. Long resumed his cheerful ways eventually, though he asked father many times, "What if she comes here to find us?" Father assured him that ghosts rarely cross provinces unbidden, a half-hearted comfort. Months passed. Life regained normalcy, overshadowing the memory with daily tasks. The Tom family seldom discussed the matter publicly, not wanting to stoke rumor. Yet among themselves, they carried a private vow, never again stay at a questionable hotel just for the sake of saving money. One sweltering afternoon, father received a phone call from an unknown number. The voice introduced herself as Mai, a local investigating alleged hauntings at the Namgyung Hotel for a small Kienjong newspaper column. She'd heard rumors of a family's terrifying night in room 105. Possibly a staff member had leaked a tip. Mai asked father for an interview or confirmation. Stricken by memories, father politely refused, unwilling to retell the ordeal in detail for public consumption. The family wanted no spotlight. They had nothing to prove. Mai said she understood, but hinted that multiple guests had reported eerily similar experiences. She thanked him, apologizing for intruding. Hanging up, father told mother about the call. They shared a grim look. Apparently, others had faced the same horror, meaning the spirit was no random phenomenon. The caretaker or manager's refusal to confront the truth only perpetuated the cycle. They pitted future unsuspecting travelers, but felt powerless to fix it. The only real recourse, if rumors spread enough, the hotel might have to close or exorcise the spirit. Late that summer, while tidying a closet, mother found the family suitcase used during the Kienjong trip. Digging in a side pocket, she discovered a small Polaroid photo from a beach outing earlier. She nearly dropped it upon noticing a smudge near the edge. Squinting closer, she realized it resembled the silhouette of a woman with long hair, looming behind father's figure. The edges blurred as though partially transparent. Had the camera captured something ephemeral? Or was it a trick of the light? Mrs. Han immediately showed father and the children. Disturbed, father planned to destroy the photo, but mother hesitated. "It could be a coincidence," she said softly. "Let's just burn incense for that lost soul. Pray she finds peace." In the end, father tossed the photo into the kitchen stove flame, hoping to break any lingering tie. The memory of that image lingered though, like an unspoken reminder that the ghost's presence once brushed their everyday reality. Years later, Long, now older, asked father if the Kienjong incident really happened as he remembered. Father admitted it was real. He still bore faint scars from that night's choking, subtle though they were. Long shuddered, saying he sometimes recalled that intangible voice in the dark. The family seldom traveled overnight without thoroughly researching lodging. Even when returning to Kienjong for a friend's wedding, they stayed at a modern chain hotel in the city center, refusing to risk cheap motels again. No one ever learned the truth of the Namgyung Hotel's haunted room. Did a woman truly die there, leaving her restless spirit behind? Or did some other malevolent presence dwell in those walls, hungry for the unsuspecting? The Tom family could only guess. They found no official records, no mention from local news. The staff's hush implied a hidden tragedy. Possibly, the woman had endured heartbreak, betrayal, or a bleak end. For reasons unknown, she clung to room 105, lashing out at whomever dared sleep there. In the end, the Tom family's story became a hush of caution among relatives. They recounted it in undertones at gatherings. If someone teased them about superstitions, father would merely pull back his collar a bit, revealing the faint line around his neck, a silent testimony. People who saw it felt a cold wave of disbelief. Thus ended their brush with the supernatural, a chilling testament to how a short overnight stay can turn into a harrowing confrontation with something beyond mortal comprehension. The memory of that strangling presence, the hair swirling in the tub, and the hidden Bua under the bed never fully vanished from their minds. But life moves on. They carried gratitude for survival, hoping that restless spirit might someday find release. And if not, perhaps the next unfortunate guests of Room 105 would serve as her next midnight visitation.